Something I think that would help greatly in this space and would be wonderful for America would be the appointment of you to the role of US Ambassador to the UN. I know there's been plenty of articles, speculation. Would you want the role?
Certainly, again, I would be honored and privileged to serve under President Trump again. And if that is the role he would wish for me to take, I would take it with glee. It would certainly be an honor to do so. And look, Erin, I think you're familiar with the fact I was born in Iran myself, and we escaped in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. And so there's nobody more prepared to take on the Islamic Republic of Iran than I am in the United Nations. There's a lot of priorities, like I said, DOGing the UN, holding them accountable for their bias against Israel. And also something that is little talked about is the Christian genocide that's taking place in the Middle East.
Ellie Cohanim, thank you so very much for joining me. It's such a pleasure. I've been such a big fan of yours for a long, long time, so it's lovely to actually talk to you now.
Well, it's very mutual, Erin. Thank you for having me on.
Tell me, you met with a mother this morning, today, whose son was taken by an UNRWA employee. Could it get any more obvious how flawed this organization is and all of the little mini ones attached to it?
Yeah, it's kind of stunning, I think, for us to really understand the corruption, the moral rot of the United Nations, which incredibly was founded after the Holocaust with this mandate to bring the world together to do good and to do peacekeeping. And instead, it has been fully taken over by Chinese interests, by the China-Russia-Iran axis, by the global South that seems to be working very hard and in cahoots with China, Russia, and Iran to undermine Western civilization, undermine all that is good and moral in the world. And so, to what you were just talking about, Erin, is that earlier today I met with Ayelet, whose son, Yonatan, on October 7th was abducted from the Nova Festival by Hamas. And they have full documentation that, in fact, the person who abducted Yonatan was an UNRWA employee and a so-called social worker for UNRWA. This is a person who was collecting paychecks from the United Nations, and really what that means is that he was collecting paychecks from taxpayers all around the world, the United States, Australia, you name it. That's where his funding came from.
Now, I've existed in this space for a much shorter period of time than you have, and I am astounded by what I've seen thus far, and really my focus here has only been since October 7. Yours has been well prior. How does the rest of the world, the vast majority of good, decent people, not see this organisation for what it is? Because they're not even clever in being subtle about it. It's not like it's really well done. I mean, it's obvious I would have thought it should be obvious to all.
You're exactly right. It's kind of like a satire when you look at the United Nations. And the best example I can give of that is also breaking news of today. Apparently, Qatar has been named to one of the bodies of the United Nations that is so-called for women's rights. Now, just imagine if a Qatari woman wants to participate on this council or this body, she would need the permission of her husband. And so, this is the hypocrisy, the moral rot, the latent hypocrisy of the United Nations. And this is a reality, sadly, that we have to face, that's the UN is just, a hypocritical, anti-American, anti-Western institution. So, I think the question that behooves us is how do we respond to it? And I certainly have, priorities that I hope that the Trump administration will consider. I have to say, though, at the outset that President Trump has already issued an executive order in February, which demands that we do an accounting of all funding that's going to UNRWA. So that's important, and hopefully that's going to be instituted very quickly. But other things and the president has already defunded UNRWA. So the executive order is for all UN funding, and he has in addition to that, defunded UNRWA. So the other priorities should certainly be to help dismantle UNRWA completely. And I want to talk a little bit when we can about the definition of a Palestinian refugee. But beyond that, the United States is underwriting 25% of the overall budget of the UN. And there's no good reason for that. I know that this is a complete waste of the American taxpayer dollar. We know that the president is working so hard to deliver for the American people all the financial benefits that he can to bring prosperity to our country. And so certainly we need to DOGE the United Nations. And if I can, I want to just speak for a moment about the definition of a Palestinian refugee. It's interesting to note that there is a United Nations definition of a refugee, and then there's a specific definition that applies only to Palestinians. And what the Palestinian definition does is that it passes on refugee status from generation to generation, and also even if the person has now become a citizen of a second or third country. And so what you have is situations like the father of the Hadid, the Bella and Hadid and Gigi Hadid models, right? And their father who has this apparently, mansion somewhere in Los Angeles. And so that is a man who's continue to collect from United Nations refugee status and refugee funding. And if you ask yourself the reason why is the UN doing this, well, it's to perpetuate the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict so that never will this refugee population ever find another home, and so that never will there be an actual peace between Israel and her Arab neighbors. And so, yes, the list of UN corruption, hypocrisy, moral rot, and decay is rather long.
So how long do countries like the US and Israel more than anywhere else, how long do they sit there in that chamber and allow this mob to completely move away from every reason that it was created for and its entire purpose, and humiliate and treat with no respect and lie and platform terrorism and nations that wish to do us harm? When do you say enough, we don't want to play this game anymore? You look at Hungary with the ICC just saying, not today, no more, thank you, walking away. When do countries actually start to do tangible things that show the UN that we're not playing this game anymore?
Well, I think that's a terrific question. And what I would advocate for is to start to slowly, through budgeting, look at a way to eventually exit the United Nations. Because if it's no longer carrying out the mission that it was mandated with from its outset, and if it is no longer representing the best interests of the United States, if it has been hijacked by others like China and other countries, then certainly it's questionable as to whether it is in the best interest of the United States in the long run to stay within the UN. I would say the challenge is the UN Security Council and the international decisions that are made in that body, and the United States having a veto and the repercussions of what takes place in the votes that take place in that body. And so certainly it's a complicated situation, and it takes deliberation and leadership from the president to make those decisions of where he would like to see the United States in the long run. But I think there's no doubt that the American people are fed up with the corruption that has taken over the UN.
Something I think that would help greatly in this space and would be wonderful for America would be the appointment of you to the role of US ambassador to the UN. I know there's been plenty of articles, speculation. You're apparently on a short list. What can you tell me about that?
Well, what I can say is that it was really the honor and privilege of a lifetime to serve under President Trump in the first administration as his deputy special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And certainly, there are a lot of wonderful names that I think the president might be looking at. people who I know well, who are former colleagues and friends, and there's just wonderful, wonderful people I think that the president can choose from, and so he has a good problem in that. Um, but Erin, what we know about the United Nations is that the president will certainly, I have no doubt, pick someone who's going to be a fighter, really to take on the UN, take on the hypocrisy and the corruption, and fight for the interests of the United States, which is an absolute must in that institution.
Would you want the role? And you can tell me if you're not comfortable speaking about it in any way, but I mean, I can't think of anyone that would be better. And you're right, there are so many people who are incredibly brilliant, very well qualified. But when I look at what you have advocated for a very long time, not just recently, I can't see anyone who would be more suited or more brilliant in that space.
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind words. And certainly, again, I would be honored and privileged to serve under President Trump again. And if that is the role he would wish for me to take, I would take it with glee. It would certainly be an honor to do so. And look, Erin, I think you're familiar with the fact I was born in Iran myself, and we escaped in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. And so there's nobody more prepared to take on the Islamic Republic of Iran than I am in the United Nations. We have snapback sanctions that we need to start instituting against the regime very shortly. And so we certainly need somebody back in the United Nations as soon as possible to get that moving. There's a lot of priorities, like I said, doging the UN, holding them accountable for their bias against Israel. And also something that is little talked about is the Christian genocide that's taking place in the Middle East. The UN, as I said earlier, they're just completely ignoring their mandate and their charter. And if they were doing their job, then they should be working on this actual genocide that's taking place in the Middle East. And so there's a lot of work to do to really try to save and secure the Christian population in the Middle East, and so much more. So there's a lot to be done there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I shared something yesterday, the execution of three Christians. It's just heartbreaking, and you're right. No one seems to care if there is no opportunity to try and demonize Israel or the Jewish population when it comes to anything that's happening in the Middle East, in Africa, or all over the world. A final question. Do you have hope that your people will be freed in the short term, that the people of Iran can claim back their country? There are so many incredible people working so hard in this space. The vast majority of the population do not want the Islamic regime in charge. Is there hope? I hope you say yes.
Well, I certainly do think there's hope. And the reason I do is that if you look at the broad sweep of history, this regime falls into the same category as the Nazi regime, as the communist regime. And so you look at those regimes in the countries where they took over for a short period of time, and that was because they were anomalies in those countries, in those societies. And I think it's very easy to look at the long and really proud history of the Persian people, which became the Iranian people, and to understand that this regime is truly an anomaly. They really are destined for the dustbin of history. I personally believe that it's a question of when, not if. I know that the Iranian people want a government that represents them and who they are. And look, there's a lot of factors that certainly indicate weakness in the regime right now. Whether it's their currency, which is worth less now than it has ever been. The fact that Israel took over their ability to the Iranians' ability to withstand any kind of an airstrike right now. There's a lot of factors. The fact that Israel has decimated Iran's terror proxies, right? They've decimated Hamas, they've decimated Hezbollah. We see right now President Trump and the U.S. administration, we're giving it to the Houthis in Yemen, and this is also a very little reported fact. But just this weekend, we started to hear news that Iran's last terror proxy, the Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, has started to say that they're willing to disarm. Okay. And so, the Iranian regime is incredibly weak. And so, yes, I have a lot of hope for the people of Iran, that one day they will have a government that represents the proud history of the Iranian people.
Ellie, they're so lucky to have you, and so is America. And I hope we talk next when you have a brand new role. Very excited for
Well,
you.
thank you. And I want to just say one thing.
Please.
You have become a shining light where there's so much darkness in the world, so much falsehood, so much lies. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done and that you continue to do. And I want you to know, and I know the audience, everyone who's with us today and watching, you have so many people who thank you for your bravery and your courage, and we stand with you in everything that you're doing today.
Bless you. Thank you so much. That means so much.